But hey, happy Saturday, everybody. Hope your long weekend's going well so far. How you doing, Rage and Pseudo?
Doing good. Doing good.
Excellent. We've got a pretty special and rather interesting panel today. Because today, I'm a student. I don't really get to share much of anything with you, so I thought we'd start with a little bit of news. I don't know how much you two have heard of this. It was brought to my attention recently. Have you been following blockchain items in gaming ecosystems?
Not closely.
But you know it's starting to happen.
Yes.
There is one group of 6 games now that I was invited to look at where they are using blockchain items. And essentially what this means, if you're not sure what that means, is that is a single and unique instance of that item, and you own that item, and it can be applied to you as like its own unique identifiable thing. And because they're doing it across the whole ecosystem, if you have that one item, you can use it in all of the games. Which sounds really cool at first. At first.
The key part of this phrase is "at first."
Well, I'm glad
wondering.
I'm glad you say that, because I know what I thought when I first saw this, and I was really hoping that I wasn't on my own in this thinking that it's not a good idea. It's not a good thing. Not a good thing at all.
Well, it's an interesting concept, right? Because at first you start thinking like, well, isn't that kind of neat though? Like you can say that, I'm the only one who ever will have this unique instance of this item. And yeah, that's pretty cool. That's kind of neat. Like you get to have this really exclusive thing. But then you look at what has happened with other games and their marketplaces that are not unique. Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the price tags I saw in like the marketing artwork and stuff for these items were getting kind of insane. They really were. And these companies are basically printing money at that point. Hey, we've generated another instance of this item on the blockchain. It is unique and it has its own stats, and now buy it for hundreds of dollars. And that's the only way you're getting it. And this is literally the prices I'm seeing, and it turns it into its own economy, because you own that unique instance of it means you can sell that unique instance of it. Because you have to actually own it. It's no longer part of their service. You're owning a piece of a blockchain. It's basically cryptocurrency with items. Is what it is.
Cryptocurrency with even less regulation. Yay! No, regulation? Not yay.
Okay, so I'm glad you two had the exact same response I did, because people who are just kind of gamers and don't really fully understand, they're mostly just seeing this, oh, you can use the same item in all these different games, that's cool, and they're jumping in on it and like buying into this idea. And no, stop. Stop where you are and think about this. It's not a good idea. Those items should not have real world value. It's a digital item in a game. Don't turn it into a real currency.
You say that, but there's been a long and rich history of selling digital goods inside video games. I mean, it hasn't stopped gold farmers in various games. It hasn't stopped people from selling accounts.
You could argue that it's the service of gathering it that they're paying for at that point.
Sure.
But like TF2 and hats and stuff like that have always been around.
Oh, yeah. I realize it's always been a thing.
Yeah, I actually don't know if this is really too terrible of a way to go to actually have a ledger for these transactions, because currently everything's kind of just handled by the community, and it's very open to duping and exploits and stuff like that, where if the market's already there and it's currently just being exploited and they want to use a tool that prevents that exploitation, like sure. But the unfortunate, of course, side of things too is that pricing for this stuff is getting a bit ridiculous, but at the same time, they're not forcing you to buy it. It isn't an integral part of the game, at least.
Yet.
Yet being the key word.
But at least you're not forced to play these games at the same time too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's where things are going. I could see it getting huge for games like, Second Life and like social MMOs, where it is a lot about that social status.
Yep.
And they want to have these super rare items that people can sell, and it gives opportunities to content creators. They can create and sell the material themselves, and that way it's not really the company themselves that are profiting. They might take network and transaction fees, but it kind of opens up for a market of that way.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it's not instantly bad. It's not like automatically bad. And I 100% agree with this. It could be good. It could be good.
Potentially.
Yes. But I don't, just with the history of the way marketing and monetization has gone in the gaming world, I don't see this being a good thing. I see it being more exploitive of the gamers than anything.
People just need to remember that you're actually just buying a token. All you're really doing is just buying like a hash value, which just kind of represents the item that you have in there. And that's not really concrete to actually being the item, especially if it's something that they're saying is, a unique one-of-a-kind thing. No one will ever have that same item. It's like not impossible for someone to, upload something that's extremely similar with one small minor change on the blockchain. And then, sure, it's it's a different token, but it looks basically the same. And the whole point of you getting that thing was to have the limit has it, but now now you're not. And there goes the value that you kind of valued it at and put into it.
Yeah. Interesting note before we dive in fully into getting good. WoW did originally have a 1 per server item.
Interesting.
Yep. A vanilla WoW had an item that could only be gotten once at one point in the history of the server. And that was it. And if you weren't there at the time when it happened and were the one to get it, you could never get it. And little things like that really made vanilla WoW special. Because when you saw the guy running around the world on his bug mount, you were like, oh,
that's the guy.
It was a hunter on our server named Toto that got it. It was the opening of the Encourage gates. You could get a bug mount that you could use anywhere in the world. You could always get your bug mount in Encourage, but you could only use it in the instance of Encourage. Unless you had the one world one, and it was a legendary mount.
Neat.
Yep. Totally useless to the game, but really cool ad. Okay. Teach me, sirs. There's our news out of the way.
All right. Well, now that we're done the news section of the show, we wanted to talk a little bit about different things that you can do to, incorporate into how you play shooter games in order to get a little bit more proficient at them. Things that you can practice, things that you can work on in order to pwn noobs, as they say. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about is actually something that a lot of people don't really think about in regards to shooters, but that's actually your peripheral setup. Oop, typey type. So with your peripherals in a shooter, you have some very specific things that you want to be able to do. You want to be able to aim accurately. You want to be able to move smoothly. And you want to be able to react quickly. And that first and that last thing, number 1 and number 3 there, seems like something that could be, at odds. Because, you'd think, okay, well, I want to be able to acquire targets quickly. That means I should have high sensitivity, right? Well, not necessarily. So let's talk about mice a little bit. Mice have a sensor in the bottom. Like this little doodad right here. Hi. That little doodad will track individual dots on the mouse pad. And it'll basically just register, how many of those dots have passed, how much space have you covered, and then it translates that into movement on your screen. So you get, you move the mouse, the screen moves. But the end result of this is that when you've got your sensitivity set very high, or your DPI on your mouse set very high, it's reading a lot of dots. And the more dots that it reads, the more the mouse moves. So now if you've got your sensitivity set too high or your DPI set too high, you have no control over where your cursor is going. It'll just fling you all over the place. And the inverse is true as well. If you've got your DPI or your sensitivity set too low, you'll have to do huge motions, like all the way across your desk, in order to actually get your cursor to move at all, which is also not good because you do need to actually acquire that target at some point. So you want to find a nice balance between the two settings. So DPI settings can be both too high and too low. Want to find the Goldilocks setting. Generally, this is accepted to be around 800 to 1200 DPI on your mouse. You want to have somewhere in that range based on how you react to the video game and how much space you have to throw your mouse around. I like to play right around 1000 DPI. I find that gives me, a nice blend between a precision aim, so that like when you're making small movements, the mouse will actually pick it up properly, and a quick aim where when you're making small movements, it doesn't just throw your aim way off. And of course that can be adjusted in game as well. Although most competitive shooters will have an option to take raw mouse input rather than modifying any of your inputs, which is greatly appreciated. So Goldilocks setting generally between 800 and 1000 or 1200 DPI. That's for setting up your mouse.
You're just gonna need to play with it. Just grab a setting and go. Don't think about it too much. Don't put too much effort into it. And then as soon as you play it for like 15 minutes, you're gonna know it's not fast enough, or it's too fast, or it might just feel right away, and you can just go with it.
A good idea as well is to find games that have shooting ranges, or could be a custom level, or could be built right into the game. I know most Counter-Strike games, actually all of them, have some sort of custom map that is a shooting range that'll have some sort of interactive, buttons or mechanics that you can, spawn targets to shoot, you can spawn enemies to shoot, and you use that, and you can, swap between the different DPIs and just kind of practice for 5 minutes to see which one, feels right, which one feels good, which one, you did the best with, you got the most headshots with, and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, and that also ties a lot into the settings and the controls options as well in the actual video game. You generally want the in-game sensitivity to be as close to 1 as possible. Like if the game doesn't have a take raw mouse input option, you want to set it to 1. So the DPI on your mouse is exactly what you're getting in game. Some games that doesn't actually work. Like Killing Floor, for instance, I have to run like 1.15 to get it to feel the same as it does on my desktop. But the goal is to get it to feel exactly like it does when you're just using your mouse on the desktop.
Yeah, something to remember in all these different games that you play is the mouse sensitivity. There's no standard. Right? There's no way they absolutely have to implement this, so we really have no idea what every game is doing on the back end, and you're just going to have to learn that game and how you like that game set up, and it'll change a little bit game to game.
Yeah. It's dependent on what engine the game is using, and also dependent on how they implemented mouse input. So there's quite a bit to work around as far as setting up a mouse. So now that we've talked a little bit about DPI settings, there's one more fairly important thing to consider when you're setting up your mouse area, and that is the mouse area itself. You want to have enough room to be able to, instead of just using your wrist to move your mouse around, because that introduces the strain, extra strain on your wrist and can cause RSI, which is really bad. You do not want repetitive strain injuries. You want to be able to move your arm at the elbow, like this, rather than with your wrist.
To put it into context, there is a reason I ended up getting this mouse pad.
Yeah, you want the big ones. So you want to be able to have enough room and your mouse sensitivity set right so that you can use your elbow rather than your wrist, because if you use your wrist, you can put a lot of strain on it. You really don't want to be dealing with RSI. And you want to make sure that you have enough room that you can comfortably move the mouse both to the left if you're right-handed without hitting the keyboard, which is why a lot of keyboards that you see first-person gamers use will be smaller sizes, and to the right without running out of mouse pad.
Another kind of small nice thing about using your kind of elbow rather than just your wrist is that when you actually kind of pan left to right, you're going to find that you're more level and you're not going to be kind of interchanging. If you're turning just your wrist, you'll find that you'll kind of curve down a bit and you'll start kind of aiming more towards the ground rather than just keeping it level to, where you're trying to hit, typically the head or the chest.
And that's another excellent point. I'm just going to type up the notes on mouse area here. Mouse area, not too small, enough room to use your elbow. Not so big that your keyboard is way out of in front of you. And enough room to move both left and right. Because as Pseudo just brought up, there's actually something that a lot of people don't consider when they're playing first-person shooters, because they go, oh, it's a 3D game. I need to be aware of three dimensions in my surroundings. But it's that you almost never have to look up and down. Just straight up. Almost never. So you want your lateral movement to be as consistent as possible, and you don't want it to be too high or too low. The number one problem that I see with most first-person gamers is that they just stare at the ground all the time. They're just the cursor just on the ground. You're never going to make headshots when you're looking at their ankles. It's not going to happen. So you got to adjust so that when you're moving around, your cursor is level with at least center of mass, at least their chest, and whenever possible, level with the head of your enemy. Because then you don't need to move your mouse around to make that headshot. You've got it set up already. All you need to do is a little bit of lateral movement. Okay, so that's me ranting about mice for a little while. Pseudo, you want to talk a little bit about keyboards?
I'll just say the only time I ever aim center mass now at this point that I've gotten to is when I'm using like a minigun that has just a cone spread and I want most of the bullets to hit what I'm shooting at. Like in Killing Floor 2, when I have the big minigun, I'll aim center mass and you'll just see things go and delete.
For what Board's saying, if no headshots are needed, or even just some shooter games too, depending what they are, center mass is typically, your safest bet. It's the biggest part of the body. It's the easiest to hit. It's probably level to where you're looking anyways, and like walking. So that's, like I said, it's really dependent on the game. Like I play a lot of Insurgency, and Insurgency is kind of more on the realistic side. So everyone kind of just dies in 2 to 3 shots anyways from, hits to the chest. One shot, but chest is fine. Most guns fire really fast, so like you don't really have time to go for headshots. You just kind of just keep it level, and then when you enter a room, just start firing, hit them in the chest twice, and you're basically good to go. Yeah,
and that is highly dependent on the game that is being played. Like something like Insurgency, Counter-Strike, anything that's trying to be realistic, it's 1 or 2 shots. you don't really need to go for the headshot. But if you're playing something that's less realistic, like something that's built on the Quake engine, for instance, and that would be the traditional Quake games, that would be Call of Duty, that would be, well, technically Titanfall is built on Source engine, but they made Source mimic Quake as closely as they could. You have a longer time to kill, so you need to maximize the damage of each individual shot. So you always want to be aiming for the head in games like that.
Destiny 2 would be a good example. That's a popular one still today.
Yeah, very, very long time to kill in Destiny. Same with Halo. You want to be shooting the weak points as much as possible.
Long time to kill. Unless you despawn a whole hallway in one shot.
Maybe. Yeah, I've actually just realized I don't have any water. So I'm going to do something about that. Pseudo, you talk about keyboards.
Sure. I will try my best. Let's talk him up here.
Just pick an RPG and fire. Yeah, so while he's typing away there, as I was saying, when you were asking about RPGs, board, with explosives, don't try to hit them with the explosive. Try to hit them with the blast. More often than not, the mistake I see people make with like rocket launchers and stuff is they fire the rocket right at the thing, and then it's slow and the thing is fast and the thing moves and the rocket just keeps going. Aim at the wall, aim at the floor around them, and it's much harder for them to avoid the blast than it is for them to avoid the rocket itself. Yeah.
Emergency's a fun time for rockets. They just completely destroy everything in a room, and it's kind of a problem because people spam them.
That's kind of what rockets do.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in a room if a rocket went off in there.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I generally don't like realistic shooters.
It's mostly just mind my own business, and then I'm gone, and I respawn, and I'm gone, and I respawn. Hey, it's enemy, and I'm gone. And if they're like more on the heavier on the realism side, then you're just out for the match, and you're like, well, that was a fun time. Got 2 seconds of gameplay.
Okay, on a quick joke or funny story before you guys jump into your keyboards. On the note of the firing RPGs right at people, the funniest thing I've ever seen in a first-person shooter, still to this day. Do you remember the nuke in Unreal Tournament?
Oh yeah, the Redeemer.
Yeah. So a buddy of mine has this thing locked on at a guy, and he fires it, and he stays zoomed in to be able to watch it fly. And right after he fires, all we see on the zoomed in scope is the face of some guy who turned a corner and looked at him right after he fired it. And right after the guy turned the corner, he took the Redeemer to the chest and exploded and killed both of them. So all we saw was big face and then death. I'll never forget that one. that was not likely.
Good old Quake. Yeah, keyboards. I'll briefly talk about ghosting. It's not really a problem anymore, but it's still something to be aware of. Especially, it's mostly just with cheaper keyboards, and that's kind of just going on about how many keys down that the keyboard will support. Nowadays, this isn't really a problem. I remember when I first started getting into gaming, it was mostly kind of you cheap down a keyboard. You might get a keyboard that only supports like 3 to 4 keys down at the same time, which, you know, sounds like a lot, but when you're playing a game, it really isn't, because if you're trying to move forward, if you're trying to sprint and you're trying to jump, all of a sudden, you know, what ghosting is it's not going to register some of those later keys. You're only going to get either the first 2, or it might register the newer keys and let up the old ones. So all of a sudden now you stop moving forward, or you don't register your jump. And it's just something just to kind of be around there. If you're going to go in the budget side, just make sure that the keyboard is supporting anti-ghosting, or at least has, you know, decent support for it.
And just to call out what I'm talking about in the chat to go on sort of on topic with ghosting, back in the day, the reason you would see keyboards that don't have good anti-ghosting characteristics was because USB 1 and 1.1 actually didn't have enough bandwidth. They weren't fast enough to do it. So you would often see keyboards back in the day packaged with a PS2 connector that you could just plug that USB thing into, and it would then send system interrupts rather than having to pull on the USB bus.
It's wild how far we've come on USB bandwidth.
Nerds.
Yeah, it's not so much a problem anymore, at least, especially with, as Raider's saying, with the USB bandwidth we have, but it still can show up on cheaper keyboards. So if you're going for a budget-oriented build, just be something you're aware of. There are plenty of budget keyboards that will, not have this problem.
Yeah, I always spend too much on my keyboards and never regret it. So not usually a problem I have.
Keyboard and chair, I find, are like vastly underrated and very important, because your chair for your back and your keyboard's for your hands. Like if you're using not a great keyboard, you're gonna kind of really notice how much your wrist and your hands are gonna start hurting. I would lift mine up, but it's wired down.
My cable was pulled real tight when I pulled that up.
I love this keyboard. It's wireless and zero latency.
Yeah, so that's actually something that we can talk about next if you want to do input delay pseudo. There's a new system of wireless that has been becoming more popular because most wireless keyboards are actually done with Bluetooth. It turns out Bluetooth is really, really, really slow. Like really slow.
Bluetooth is really concerned with making sure that you are exactly who the hell you say you are when you tell it to do something. That means it has to make sure you are who you are before it does the thing, and that's where your latency comes from. Security is slow.
Yeah. So like you press a key on a Bluetooth keyboard, it goes, oh, hey, I hit a key. And then the Bluetooth receiver goes, are you sure you hit a key? And the Bluetooth keyboard goes, yes, I hit a key. And then it goes, I'm this keyboard. I promise I'm this keyboard. And the Bluetooth receiver says, are you sure you're that keyboard? And the keyboard goes, yes, I can verify that I'm that keyboard. Here's my key. And they go, okay, I've verified that you are that keyboard. What key did you press? You pressed the space bar? Okay, I'll make you jump now. Like it's a whole thing.
I had an early Bluetooth mouse where I only used it for about half an hour because I would literally move my arm across the desk and then watch the mouse go across the screen, and I was like, oh no. Oh no.
And there are now systems by companies like Logitech, Corsair, SteelSeries, Razer that have developed their own mostly proprietary wireless systems that allow the mouse to actually have less than 1 millisecond delay time for wireless. Yeah. Slipstream, whatever the hell Logitech's one is.
Lightspeed for the win.
Yeah. So as you can see, as you can probably tell by the fact that I'm doing a lot of the talking, I play a lot of shooters, and yet I use a wireless mouse. 5 years ago, this wouldn't have been a thing. All of the wireless mice were too slow. You could not be competitive with a wireless mouse. Because of these new technologies, you can actually have a wireless mouse that responds imperceptibly different from a wired mouse. Then you just need to deal with charging it, which is why I went with the Logitech, because it has wireless charging, blah, blah, blah. But the advances in wireless technology actually allow you to move the mouse and have it react. And the keyboard that Deus is using, because it doesn't rely on Bluetooth, because it doesn't rely on a wire, actually just connects to the same technology that the wireless mice that we use to connect, which allows for almost instantaneous response to the button press.
It's getting pretty crazy now. And one thing to keep in mind for a lot of people is that wireless will actually be faster than wired when we get, as the technology improves, because eventually we're getting to the point where it's just distance, it's a straight line, technically speaking, for wireless to the access point. Whereas wired, depending on how much wire you have, there is quite a bit. And it seems like, it wouldn't really matter, but we're getting to the point where it's like less than a millisecond, getting into like very, very close things. And that stuff actually does matter. And it's really interesting because controller technology for consoles is actually very impressive. And it does use Bluetooth. So it's kind of crazy on how they're doing it. But for a lot of their cases, wireless is actually faster than wired for a lot of use cases. And sometimes it just comes down to how USB devices are supported and kind of the layers that are in there, and things get slower. But it's also just with Bluetooth, it's a straight line. There's nowhere else for it to go. Technically a straight line. It's being shot everywhere, but the actual connection that gets made is there. And the delays are getting pretty low, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I'm super, super, super impressed by the light speed. This is the first time I've ever used a wireless mouse and enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's really good. And Corsair's Slipstream, just as good. SteelSeries has a less than 1 millisecond wireless connection as well. Like most of the gaming companies are getting quite good at this, but the key is to look for mice and other peripherals that do not use the Bluetooth connection. They use their proprietary connection. I mean, ideally it wouldn't be proprietary, and then you could use any receiver with any mouse, but they want to sell their own hardware. Can't blame them for that.
Also, they don't want to share the tech that they've spent all this money creating, and they've all spent money creating their own tech. Can't expect it to work both ways. So, I mean, we can basically sum this all up by, if you don't want to invest a whole lot of money into your FPS setup, get wires. That's basically what we're saying.
Yeah, I should probably talk a bit about wires too, because like wireless stuff is for the good stuff is on the very high side of the budget. A quick thing on wires: make sure, at least for your mouse, that you have a fair bit of slack. Make sure there's nothing in the way that's going to be bumping it, that you're going to be hitting. Any sort of resistance, even though you might not feel it, will cause you an issue. If there's even just a bit of your wire was just say hit a cup, your mouse is going to move from that. You're going to slightly go down, you're going to slightly go up, you're going to slightly go to the left, you're going to slightly go to the right, and you're going to have to make adjustments. And it seems like it's something that could be minor, but you want to make sure that the path that your mouse is actually moving is clear, so that you're not getting either additional resistance or you're not getting interference with that cable hitting stuff, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're getting like a stutter, or it just not, you'll feel like your aiming is off.
Yeah, and it's something that's almost imperceptible, almost, and then you'll just realize that you're not hitting your headshots anymore, and you go, why? My coffee mug is too close.
The best way to find it, I find, is to play like a sniping shooter game. Like you can take your time and place your shots, and you'll really see how much of a difference sensitivity DPI makes. Because there'll be points where there's a person standing there and you're just trying to hit him, but due to your sensitivity, you keep skipping over the few couple pixels that he's there, because you don't have a smooth transition between all of them. And no matter what you do, because of your sensitivity, you're never going to be able to hit them, because you're just always skipping over that part. As well as if there's resistance, you'll move over and you'll notice that all of a sudden you'll jump up a couple of pixels, or you'll drop down a couple of pixels.
Van Osdol, Icy Rain, Roy G. Biv, Dude Bro TTV, and Vault005. I recognize 4 out of 5 of those names. Welcome to the table, everybody. And Darth Mole, thank you so much again for the gift subs. You're doing so much for the community here. We super appreciate it. Hey, and Carria, welcome. On my little ad for the looking into your mouse, making sure you have enough cable, you can look into mouse anchors, which are quite cheap, or mouse bungees, they can also be called. They are slightly different design. They'll be varying vastly in prices all over the place, and both of the ones you look at, they basically do the same thing. An anchor is a weight essentially that the mouse cable runs through, so that you can feed enough of it through that you have, and then you only have to worry about the anchor forward being the slack. The rest of it can go ahead and be tight, and the anchor keeps everything that you're going to be using there and available and in a nice workable range. And the bungee does similar. It sort of works as an arm. It raises the cable up a little bit, and then it helps sort of bend a little bit as you need it and adjusts the cable as you need it and prevents it from pulling and tugging on your mouse.
Damn it, Mole. Back to keyboards though, because we were in the about 2/3 of the way done talking with keyboards. There's another thing to consider when you're choosing a keyboard. Well, there's two things to consider when you're choosing a keyboard, other than ghosting and input delay, because those are mostly non-issues these days. There's switch type, which is generally divided into two big categories.
That's really more just what keyboard you prefer, though.
No, there's actually reasons not to use a rubber dome keyboard. They do respond slower, and they have a higher failure rate. So you're going to experience more problems over time with your W, A, S, and D keys burning out, as well as just having really weird response. But you want either you have your rubber dome keyboard or your mechanical keyboard. And a mechanical keyboard has an actual switch that actuates and causes the key to activate. That's the main difference. A rubber dome keyboard, you're just compressing some rubber, and that causes an electrical signal to be sent. As you can tell by that description, the rubber dome keyboard is generally mushy, is prone to failure because you're repeatedly squishing this bit of plastic over and over and over again, where a mechanical keyboard is less prone to failure, generally is more responsive, and you can then have your choice of what that switch is going to feel like and how much noise it's going to make. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of switches, Howling God, because we will be here for 4 hours.
Yeah, the panel is called Getting Good at FPS, not choosing a keyboard. So I promise you, if you're here for just like, I don't want to spend money on my gear, I just want to improve my skills, that's coming. It's coming soon, I promise.
Yeah, it's coming. We're just talking about theory right now. And then the last thing to consider while I unplug my keyboard here is keyboard form factor. So this is an 80% keyboard. As you can see, it doesn't have a number pad here. Now, if you were going to use a keyboard like this... Oh my God,
that's loud.
What? What's loud?
The Deus alert. I turned up the settings. That one didn't get turned down. Ow.
If you're going to use a keyboard like this for productivity, you're missing your number pad. So you don't have easy access to numbers anymore. It's kind of a pain. But what it does is, because if you're right-handed, this is where your mouse will be. It frees up a lot more movement. So generally, for mouse-driven games like an FPS, you want a smaller keyboard, as small as you can stand, while still having good features on it, which will allow you to move your mouse the most, because FPS is mostly a mouse-driven game. Or a mouse-driven genre, I should say.
You typically don't need a whole lot of keys for them either. You can probably even get by with even just like a 60% keyboard. Just give me the WSD and space bar.
Yeah, and for a while you could actually buy like little half keyboards, like little add-ons that you would just use for gaming and give you maximum mouse movement. But everybody stopped using those because they're just kind of a waste.
I got the Razer one from work for free when I
Oh really?
At the source.
I had the Logitech one.
Maybe it was a Logitech one, or maybe I don't know. I didn't use it enough. I tried it, and I'm like, you know what? This isn't going to do it for me, because most games I play are multiplayer, which means that you typically at some point want to type something. It's like I want to type something, and I'm like, oh, I can't. okay, screw this thing, and I think I just gave it away. Like, I don't want this. It's not gonna. It was neat idea, but I mean, I'm fine with just a keyboard. I don't need that much extra room.
Yeah. And after you've chosen your form factor that's appropriate for you and what you want to use it, for, then it's basically after that down to picking your preference in key switch. So the reason why. Oh, sorry, Suna. One more thing. Is there anything you wanted to touch on keyboards before I go on to how you use a keyboard in an FPS game?
Not too much. It's mostly just I wanted to touch on the switch type. When the main thing is just kind of it is preference. You'll see a lot of people make claims about gaming performance on certain switch types and stuff like that, but it really kind of just comes down to preference. And if there is any kind of improvement, it's going to be negated by your actual preference. If you're using a keyboard you're not comfortable with, it's not going to matter, how many slight microseconds or nanoseconds faster you can push a key if you're not comfortable using it. And if it's causing issues with your hands, it's all, like I said, you still have to use the keyboard at the end of the day. Actual switch type isn't going to really matter a whole lot to that. There's people that will swear by, Browns and the tactile feel of being able to touch type, not having to push the key all the way down, but at the same time, like, it's preference. And at that point, it's not so much a generalization of getting good rather than people just specializing in the hardware that they already have. And you'll find that can be done with any keyboard you have. If you practice enough, you'll get good with it.
Yeah. Use your,
unless it's rubber dome, because it will fail.
I'm speaking strictly mechanical. When you're picking mechanical, just go with your preference. Go which one feels right. If you want blues, an extra click and an extra tactile, or the responsive, it cool. If you want reds that are just, you want the keys to feel smooth and go down fast. If you want browns with a little bit of both in between there. And there's a whole lot of other ones we won't talk about because we'll talk about switches for hours.
Yeah. Just go with, like anything, it's about being comfortable with your gear. If you want to use your gear at a high level, you can't think about your gear. You just have to know it. It has to be comfortable. It doesn't matter if you're playing sports, video games, anything. Like when I played baseball, you get a new glove. You wear that glove everywhere you go for 2 months straight. It feels like it belongs on your hand. You know it intimately. You can use it easily. New hockey stick. Walk everywhere with it, take a puck with me everywhere I go, gotta break it in, gotta feel right in the hands. Do the same thing with your keyboard and mouse. If you don't know where every button on your mouse is without looking or thinking about it, gotta get used to it. Just play with it more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a bit about gear, let's talk about using it. Like I was talking about with the mice, you have a DPI range that you generally want to move set for, and you generally don't want your sensitivity or your DPI to be too high because it can cause too much movement. So if you have too much movement, then it becomes very difficult to make small adjustments to your aim. So you want to dial that down a little bit and be able to make those small adjustments very precisely. But now that you've got this lowered mouse sensitivity, you don't want to be like flinging your arm across your desk all the time to try and make shots because you're going to miss. You're going to miss a lot. So that leads us into the keyboard. And with an FPS game, you should actually be mostly aiming with your keyboard. Now, I know that doesn't sound intuitive, because I just got finished saying that this game genre is mostly mouse driven, but you want to be aiming with your keyboard, and there's 2 reasons for that. 1, it moves you. It gets you out of the way of the enemy's shot, so you don't take damage. And not taking damage means you're not dead, which means you can make them dead. And 2, if you've got your sensitivity turned down, then you have the ability to move your mouse laterally without having any up or down adjustment. So you can keep your mouse level with the head and then do small adjustments with your keyboard in order to move your reticle on top of your target. Mice are hard. Mice are imprecise. Everybody says, "Oh, a mouse is way more precise than a controller." Blah blah blah. No, no, no. Use your keyboard. Don't use your mouse.
Mouse is still more precise than a controller.
But nowhere near as precise as a keyboard.
100% agree with this, but let's be honest here. It is still more precise than a controller.
Yeah.
A big thing to really think about is go into any paint program and try and draw a straight line in any direction, left, right, preferably, to try to strafe left to right. And you'll know that you'll always have little movements up and down that's going on. But if you're using a keyboard, and depending on the game, and most game engines are similar to this, your mouse won't, or your cursor and your mouse aiming won't be affected by you actually moving your character, because, oh my God, that'd be terrible. There are games that apply a movement kind of debuff for if you fire while moving, your spread will change. But you can get used to like slightly moving, and then that of course resets, and then you can fire. But you'll be able to move, and that cursor does not move. So if you're perfectly aligned in the head, like you just strafe and sweep, basically.
We'll demonstrate this in a bit, or he'll demonstrate this in a bit.
Yeah, there is demos coming up in the second half of the show. This is not just all talking. Okay, so that I think mostly covers gear setup. There anything drop control? You mean like this? I love this keyboard.
I'm very jelly. I will get one eventually. We could talk briefly about monitors. There's a big hype about high refresh rates. They do help, but at the same time, if you have the fundamentals and you can aim like this stuff, you'll beat people with high refresh rates. No problem. It's not going to give you that much of an advantage. Every little advantage helps, but depending on what your budget is, and depending on what you're doing with your computer, I would say probably go for like a nicer keyboard and mouse setup than to really splurge on like a higher refresh rate kind of monitor. If you're already at a comfortable, if you're at like 1080p, I don't know if you really need to go for that. If you want to be more competitive, I guess it does help. It's a balance. Like if you have the money for it, then go for it. I prefer like having the really nice one, but at the same time, if you have that, but then have, not a great mouse and not a good keyboard, you kind of defeat the purpose. You're going to have more issues with that than you would being at 60 anyways.
Okay. Yeah. For all those people that are wanting the really nice monitor, if you are wanting to be like the pros and you want a nice monitor and you're not getting a keyboard and mouse and you're not running it in the lowest possible graphical settings, you're already doing it wrong, and just get your keyboard and mouse.
Yeah, start off with those first and then upgrade that later, because that'll take you a lot farther if you just have 1080p at 60 FPS, because as you'll see, when you're trying to play competitively, you're going to be playing on the lowest settings anyway, so you'll be able to run at that locked 60 no problem.
And ideally you want to double your monitor's refresh rate for the minimal input lag.
Yeah.
And if you've got a 360 hertz monitor, that means you need to be running at 700 FPS. Good luck.
Doom.
Yeah. You're confined to playing Doom Eternal. That's it. It's the only game that can hit that.
And with like SLI 3090s at 1080p.
I wonder what would happen if I put it on minimum graphics settings and ran it. Because I got 500 on Ultra.
I might get CPU bound before.
That would be amazing. CPU binding a 5950X.
Literally can't go any faster. Can't do it. Okay. So I guess let's move on to talking about some of the topics that you had, Pseudo.
Sure. Remember them real quick, because I have potato brain. I typed them somewhere. I put them in a document too. Right. Desync and a bunch of other stuff. I have it here. This is going to be a lot of this is going to be very game specific, so you're kind of going to have to pay attention to the types of games you're playing. You'll kind of recognize it as it goes through, but these are kind of just tips and tricks you'll find in a lot of modern shooters, especially if they're multiplayer networked wise. You're going to find that people complaining about, lag, desync, rubber banding, all that kind of stuff really comes up. As well as you might most of you might be aware of it, but some of you might also, have a light bulb that goes off in your head, like, oh, so that's why that happens. And the first thing I want to talk about is, which has probably happened to everyone playing Counter-Strike, is you're holding an angle, you're waiting for at the doorway, all of a sudden the person appears, and then you just get one shot, you get headshot, and you're like, well, what the hell, this hacker, like, I'm sitting here, I'm waiting, how did I not shoot him first? And a main reason for that is, due to it being networking, everyone's at a different location, the server has to keep things up, is there's going to be a bit of desync. And since you're standing and sitting still, you're kind of waiting for the server to tell you when that player was there, whereas that player is moving into that position, and then that's sending that to the server, and the server then sends it to you. So they kind of have an advantage when it comes to latency. They're going to be the one that fires first. Their shot's going to be the first for authoritative. Chances are, they're just going to kill you, or what happens in a lot of games, sometimes you'll both die depending on your reaction speed. So you'll find that happening a lot, and that's typically why you don't always want to camp the same spots or find things that are pre-fire, as well as when you're playing games, and you'll see this a lot in Battle Royale games, the people who push seem to be the ones that always kind of come out ahead, and it's because pushing, if you're doing it well, gives you that advantage because you have the latency on your side. You're going to be able to kind of get that first shot depending on, how much lag there really is and how much, desync there really is. Games like PUBG and Tarkov have gotten pretty bad for the netcode with that. You'll see a lot of people complaining where, the person comes in, they start shooting at them, and for them it seems like they're shooting at them first, but all of a sudden they just die before the other character even kind of turns around. And it's because on their screen they ran in first, turned and shot them before, the server could really catch up, or the games could really process the signal in time and show what was going on. So like I said, it's very game to game, but depending on the game you want, you're going to want to be kind of aware of that. It kind of forces you to be a bit more aggressive, which doesn't always make sense in games. Like, why do you want to run in? And it's like, well, you'll watch people who play, and they, like I said, they'll have that advantage. It always seems like they run in and somehow always get the first shot off, and it's because, depending on the netcode, they probably are. The server probably checks their shot before it checks the other person shooting back, and will give you that hit. Same with, like I said, holding those angles. Try not to hold ones that are common, that most people do. If you are, try to, kind of peek or keep moving so that, you're trying to have a bit of delay yourself. If you're peeking, sometimes, the player will come around the corner while the server thinks you're still behind the wall, so they won't get that first shot. If the game supports leaning, abuse that as much as you can. Most of the time when you lean, the game isn't going to kind of put your whole character out. It'll actually have a very small hitbox. And what you actually see in an FPS game is very different from what's actually being calculated. Your camera typically isn't actually also at your head. Most of the time it'll kind of be a lot lower near your chest. Sometimes it's not even directly where your body is. Sometimes you can peek a corner and your model will actually still be behind the wall, and only thing that's really being shown is like a bit of shoulder or maybe a bit of your gun. Or sometimes it's just, you can kind of just see right through the corner. So if the game has leaning, try to use that as much as possible. You have the smallest amount of your body exposed, so you don't just get one shot, because if you are camping a corner, chances are, depending on the netcode, the person rushing in is going to have that advantage on you.
And that actually is done intentionally, because back in my day, back in the 90s, there were a lot of games where the server code did not bias one way or the other, and that always gave campers the advantage. So there was a huge problem with people just not wanting to ever move when they were playing an FPS. So a lot of games gave the moving player the authoritative shot in order to discourage camping, because when you camp, you die more.
Yeah. And it just wasn't a good experience. And the reason why a lot of this happens too is netcode is a very complicated thing. And when you're seeing other people move around in your game, a lot of it's kind of just AI assisted. It's not actually directly inputting. And you'll find that kind of happens with laggy players. They'll move forward, but then they snap back. And what happens is that the game interprets positioning, and they think that that player is going to keep moving forward, and then it gets a packet saying, no, they actually stopped a bit ago, stop them. And what would happen if you camp a corner is you'll kind of see the person appear and then snap back, but then they're already there, and then you can shoot it, and then, you can pre-fire them a lot easier that way. Because for them, they showed up before you were kind of actually already there.
And that touches on another topic, pre-firing. So the concept of pre-firing is not very complicated. It's exactly what it sounds like. You fire before you need to, so that you're already ready to fire. You're already ready to go. That projectile's already in the air if you're not in a hit scan game. So like if you're using a grenade launcher or a rocket launcher, for instance, this is very obvious. You learn the paths that people generally take through a map, and you go, okay, well, I saw the person coming down that hallway. That means they're going to be coming out over there. So I'm going to send this rocket that way early to know that it'll be arriving at about the same time they do. And that can be applied with any projectile weapon.
The another important thing we're talking about for pre-firing, which will kind of lead us into sound, is just being very aware of in-game sound. It's something that most shooter games take very seriously, and it's kind of like a major mechanic, especially in like competitive ones. It really boils down to footsteps, and important but not as important is still gun sounds. They're important in kind of granular open world kind of battle royale games, such as, you know, PUBG, even kind of more raid oriented ones like Tarkov. You really want to be kind of aware of your surroundings and the sound that's kind of around. For Counter-Strike, if you're holding a corner and you can hear the footsteps coming, you, depending on how much you play, you can kind of get a gist of, you know, how long it'll take them. You know, if they're probably running, they're not going to stop. Okay, well, you know what? In a second, I can probably just start firing because this person's just sprinting around the corner, and I can kind of get the drop on them. Or you can, you know, push forward and turn the corner and surprise them. Or so you just know that they're coming, and you can hear how many. If there's multiple like footsteps, then you know maybe there's two, maybe there's three. If you're just one person in a corner, maybe, you know, you want to throw a grenade, or maybe you want to back up, or whatever. If you're playing a game like Tarkov, you want to be aware of, you know, who's shooting, where's the firing coming from, what direction is it, you know, how much it is. If you're playing battle royale games like PUBG, you really want to be aware of the distinct kind of gunfire, because you have an idea of, you know, if it's a squad-based one, if you're playing squads, you have an idea of how big the enemy squad is. You know, are they fighting someone else? Are they shooting at you? If you're hearing a lot of gunfire and it doesn't sound like anyone's shooting back, chances are they're probably shooting at you.
That's good advice, actually. I like that one. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah. You'll notice that a lot, especially in those games. If you hear gunshots, because it sounds like they're far away, but, you know, a lot of people, you know, it's hard to aim, and they'll just shoot until they hit you. And it may sound like it's far away, but if there's not people shooting back and they're still shooting, chances are it's coming at you. Another important thing is if you hear a gunshot between two and you want to engage in that fight, it gives you advantages. And for these games, you always want to build up as much advantage as you have. And especially for battle royale, if you hear someone shooting and someone shooting back, you can find where they are. And a really important thing is don't engage them right away either. If two people are fighting each other, let them fight it out, and then, you know, take the winner. I've won a lot of PUBG matches doing it this way. You're just kind of hiding out in the grass, just waiting, because a lot of people get excited and they join the gunfight, but then, you know, you've given away your position. You know, maybe that other person dies when the other person knows where you are, and now you have to kind of fight them that way. And sure, it's on equal terms, but, you know, you want to put advantages in your favor, so let them shoot each other, and now you know which one probably died, so you know kind of where the other person is, and you can kind of get the jump on them.
You do that a lot in Warzone. I'd imagine in PUBG, it's all loot based too, right? So if the two people are shooting it out and you're watching them shoot it out, you probably know exactly where the guy who just got the kill is going next.
Well, and you know, like what their capabilities are, because you just watched them fight somebody else. Did they take a bunch of damage? Are they almost dead? Sweet, you can just jump in there, one or two shots, you're done. But if you try and jump into the middle of another firefight and they've got better guns than you, then you might be screwed.
You might want to wait until they run over to see what the guy they just killed had, and then shoot him in the head. A lot. Yeah.
That's another thing too, is you can, like, if you don't know which one won, you can still kind of wait. But another thing to do is, you know, at the end of a firefight, chances are first thing they're going to do is check if anyone else is there, wait a couple seconds, and then once it's clear, start reloading. So you don't always want to jump right in after the firefight is. You want to kind of give it a second for them to, you know, start looting, and then you can kind of capitalize on that. And then you don't have to go too crazy. A lot of people will say you need to, you know, figure out the different sounds of guns, and I don't really think that's going to be too important. I think your time is probably spent learning other aspects of the games. But I will say, because my ears suck.
Once you have a good amount of experience in a game, recognizing those gunshots becomes fairly easy.
Yeah.
And once you can recognize the individual guns, you know what that person is capable of with that weapon.
I was going to say similar, is, you know, you don't really need to focus on learning them unless you've come quite a ways in the game and you're like, I don't have this yet, but it's probably going to come naturally to most people just from the hours you've put into the game. You recognize those sounds.
Yeah, and then as I was saying, I'm just going to kind of list off some tips. I'll try to type them up after I say them. But as I was saying before, when you can capitalize on the enemy reloading. It's the same thing for you. Make sure to never reload in compromising positions. I don't know how many times I've been a spectator in a match and then just watching someone start reloading and then kind of run out in the open or moving while reloading, and you're just going to find yourself in compromising positions. Especially since most games will have an audio cue for when your player is reloading. And if someone's camping or someone's waiting for you, or if you're engaged, they'll know, and then they'll know to push. But just in general, you don't want to reload too much. It's getting a lot more common in games. You want to reload when, in between firefights, or if you're with the team thing, make sure your teammates know that you're reloading, because what will actually happen more common than not is if there's a firefight, everyone's just shooting most of the time full auto, which we'll get to later, you don't want to do. And then you overload at once, and all of a sudden, they rush you and everyone's got their, hands in their pants trying to grab out a new mag, and then all of a sudden you get blasted. So you want to be really careful and really cognizant of when and how you're reloading, as well as, if you got a 30-round mag and you fired only 5 to 10 shots, and it takes 2 to 3 shots to kill someone, and there's only one enemy, you probably don't need to reload, even if it's kind of calmed down a bit.
Yes, I do.
It's such a bad habit I have from just like Battlefield days and CS. I always have to have that full clip, but it'll get you killed. If you're mid reload, also it kind of just messes with what you're seeing. A lot of time your reload animation will just go in your face. It's like trying to slam that thing into there, and all of a sudden your gun goes down. There's a person around the corner, like, oh shit. It's just like something to be aware of, something to practice. It kind of just comes. You'll notice the more you play that, I keep dying while I'm reloading. It's like, well, maybe you shouldn't reload so much. And then as well as with that, kind of just being aware of just how much ammo you have. This can be really difficult from game to game. Most games will just tell you how much ammo you have left and how much you have in your current clip or mag. Some other games like Insurgency just will kind of give you a general guideline. You'll have to push a button to look and kind of a feel, as well as some games will keep your magazines from before. So games like Tarkov and games that kind of go on the more realistic side is if you use half a magazine and then reload, you still have that half magazine. And if you reload another time, if you're running low on full ones, eventually you'll load a half one. So sometimes it's better just to kind of use them all. Even though it doesn't seem intuitive, you usually don't always need that full for a firefight. You'll find that, most firefights, you'll probably die before you get a chance to reload, or you'll kill them before they get a chance to reload. And then you can reload after it's done. If you need to, if you run out, then you have sidearms you can switch to, but it's really important not to have a bunch of half empty mags. And all of a sudden now you kind of really wish you had a full one.
Yeah.
Yeah, ammo management is a whole thing.
It's like your stamina management in Souls. It's just going to take practice and time.
Yeah, or you can just be me, where you fire a shot, you're reloading, and then you just die a lot.
It really depends again. Like some games, you should do that. You should be reloading and make sure you have a full clip, because especially games where like Killing Floor is an interesting one about this, where I think that you should probably always have as much ammo as you can, and it's really easy to gauge how much of a compromising position you're in, and that's mostly because the enemies you're fighting aren't shooting at you, they're walking up to you, and if you're caught with a scrake and you're at half clip, you're probably just going to die because you have to shoot it and then try to reload. So games like that, it makes sense. Certain weapons, it makes sense if it's got fast reload. If it's like a Winchester or something like that, it makes sense just to always kind of put it in. Same with shotguns. Most shotguns are going to be, slug at a time. So in between, you're going to kind of want to always keep it topped off. And most of the time for those guns too, you don't have a animation transition time between loading and shooting. It's very small. And that's a big thing you want to keep in mind too with certain guns. And you'll find that with games that have like huge machine guns like the SAW, is that the reload time is going to be like 5 seconds plus, and you usually can't interrupt it. And if you can interrupt it, it's still going to add a second to go back to your resting before shooting phase. So you kind of have to commit to a reload. But something like a revolver or like a shotgun, you can put like a round or two in a couple, like less than a second.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing I like about reloading shotguns in most games is it is actually just round. So if you have to interrupt, you don't just waste all of that time you spent trying to reload, and then you've still got no rounds in the clip because you interrupted it at the last second. You're like, God damn it. You still got those rounds that you were jamming in there.
And there's one more thing I wanted to touch on, just with the sound that just popped back into my mind, is a lot of people will fall for marketing on gaming headsets. they will try and find, the 5.1, the 7.1 headset because, oh, that's going to give me better directionality in the game. Well, most of the time, not really. You're better off with a good stereo headset with good imaging. Because if the game is going to rely on sound positioning, then it's got to be built into the engine to downmix that into stereo. And if you've got a stereo set of headphones that have good imaging, like you can place sounds, like things will sound like they're in different positions, then you've already got it. You don't need that 7.1 headset. You don't need to shell out $300 for headphones that sound like they're $100 because they've got a gamer label slapped on them. It's really unnecessary. Just get yourself some good, quick listening headphones.
Yeah. I was one of those that had a 7.1. I can't remember if I actually paid for it, if I got it for free. But yeah, I immediately noticed that it doesn't help at all. Like, you're still got left and right. Like, you're not actually having, an actual surround sound system. You're still going to basically hear it coming from the left, coming from the right. You've got these things cased over your ears. They're going to echo and vibrate in there, so it's not going to really matter that too much. And then plus the game engines, it depends on the game engine. Like, it's a game engine going to support it. Most games are just going to run in stereo anyways. And stereo headphones, if you've listened to the tests for it, you'll find that they're fine. The games have been, audio engineers have been around for a while, and these sounds have been, positional audio has been a thing for stereo for quite some time. If someone's directly behind you, they'll play a little bit in both. If someone's to your right, it'll just play on your right. And you only really need left and right. Like, you just need to know if they're coming from the left side, they're coming from the right side. You don't need to have this like pinpoint, oh yeah, just from audio I can tell exactly where they're from, because most of the time there's going to be so much other audio going on. It doesn't matter if you can tell if they're on the left side or the right side. That's, where should I be? Are they straight ahead? And sometimes, are they back? But if someone's behind you, you're probably in trouble anyways.
You're probably dead.
The only thing I really wanted to go over quickly about my random tips is grenades, because I find there's something that are super unutilized in a lot of FPS games. Not a lot of them have them, but a lot of people kind of forget that, they're very strong and they'll die to them a lot, and they never clicks in their head to use them. And even utility, there's a lot of grenades that their whole purpose is utility, and people ignore them because they don't get kills. And it's like, well, you can use them to, win, or, use them to get the kills. So I'll kind of go over them in general, but the main thing to think about grenades is not so much as a weapon or a killing, is that grenades are effective crowd control.
Yeah. Good for flushing. People see a grenade and they tend to run away from it.
Or did not update properly. So the first one I'll talk about, frag grenades. So these are the most common ones. Most games will have this. And as Daz was saying, they can cause enemies to displace and run out of position, or if they don't, you'll do a lot of damage to them. The effective way, if you're dealing with an entrenched position and there's a bunch of people inside, just chuck grenades in there. You're safe. You can bounce them off something. Counter-Strike is heavily, their competitive scene is heavily reliant on grenades, especially for utils and for clearing positions and killing. But it translates to other of a game too. Battlefield has grenades, Insurgency, everything. The really important things are the kind of utility. This is really kind of big on Insurgency and in Counter-Strike, and you'll see pros using these quite a bit, and that is like Molotovs and incendiary grenades. And the point of that being is that it's not so much, I'll throw it on them and then they'll die. It's, you can block off positioning. You can disrupt a position. If they're holding something, you can throw it in, it forces them out. Or let's say if there's a doorway and you're trying to hold a point, you can throw a Molotov on that doorway. Let's say it lasts 15 to 20 seconds. That's 15 to 20 seconds that the enemy can't run through, or if they want to, A, they can't see, B, they're going to be taking damage. Have super useful for Insurgency, because that game relies a whole lot on defending points. And if a bunch of people have incendiary grenades, you can throw, because most of the time you're defending, there's multiple entrances. If you throw incendiary grenades on those other entrances and leave one open, your enemy only has one choice, and that's just to go through that one opening, which you've now kind of set up a kill box. They're coming, where they're coming from. You can kind of get ready for them. Super useful for crowd control, super useful for denying access for things and setting up, advantage to you. Well, now you force them to go your way. If they want to rush in time, they have to go in the way that you're going to expect them. Another one is smoke grenades. I find that these kind of get not used as much as they should as well. They're super useful for, obscuring vision. If you need to cross an opening, if you want to rush a point, if you want to just cause some chaos, throw a smoke grenade in a room. If you want to,
especially if there's friendly fire on.
yeah, you just want to run in, and then chances are, either they'll shoot themselves, or you can kind of go in and set up a position and wait for the smoke to clear and then kind of unleash hell. Or what people kind of forget to do is you can combine grenades with it. You throw in a smoke grenade, let it kind of go. Now you can throw in your frag grenades, and if they're not paying attention to sound, or if you have someone shooting at the same time, they won't be listening for it, and now you can lob in frag grenades, and they'll blow up without people kind of moving. But super useful for blocking entrances as well. They don't do damage like Molotovs do, but no one wants to run through a smoke and then see what's on the other side. So if you throw it up front of a doorway, chances are they aren't going to run through it because they're expecting someone just to be watching on the other side, and they'll see you first. Highly suggest if they're in the game, highly suggest trying them out and finding a strat with them, because I guarantee they'll give you an advantage. And the last one I want to talk about is flash grenades. Which aren't as common in a lot of games because they are super, super annoying, and I get pissed every time someone uses one against me too. I don't get to play for a bit, and I always hate when games do that. But if they're there, use them. They give you an advantage. A bunch of people are sitting in a room, you chuck it in. It's not even just for the effect it has on them, but if it's a game where it's kind of attack and defend and people are holding angles, what it's going to do is if they hear the flashbang coming in, and that's a distinct thing for Counter-Strike, is you can hear it going like ting, 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 bouncing in, is that they're going to turn to look away. They're going to turn their backs to where the grenade is, which is going to be probably where you want to come in from. So even if they don't see, if you don't blind them, if you throw it in and time it for when you run in, they're no longer holding the position of just aiming right where your head will be. They're going to have to turn around and kind of, readjust their aim. And you're going to get that advantage of, they're not looking right at you. So you can use that to kind of disrupt not just their physical positions, but their aiming positions.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, mice are more precise than controllers, but significantly less precise than a keyboard. So you want to force them to use their mouse as much as possible, which again goes back to that whole be moving thing.
Yes, it's harder to hit a moving target. This is true. Anyway, good input.
Yeah.
Good little summary on grenades.
Yeah, I'd say I get so frustrated playing Insurgency, and just use they'll have them and I'll see them inventory, but just use them. Just throw it down, please. Just do it. If they have Molotovs, it's the easiest way to win in that game is just block down the entrances. They can't come in. And if you're pretty good at it, what you can do is you can wait for if you hear footsteps and they're in a hallway, then you just peek and chuck one in there, and then you can get kills with it if you really want to. But if you're defending, and especially if it's a time defense, you want every advantage that you can get, and that just kills time depending on how long they last. 20 seconds, if you're defending for 2 minutes, 20 seconds is quite a bit, especially if you can have multiple of them. It gives you a huge advantage for a period of time. Okay, I gotta get water, so I'll be right back real quick.
We've done a lot of talking this time.
Indeed, I have enjoyed it. I mean, not having to talk. And Mole, that's a panel we've wanted to do for a while, as well as metagame, games within game. It's a fun topic. You might just not be competitive. That's an entirely possible thing. Entirely possible.
I mean, or competitive in a different way. I personally don't play competitive games all that much anymore because I get too worked up about them. And I don't like who I am when I'm worked up like that. So I will often just focus on games where I can go in and learn a mechanic and get really good at that mechanic and just be able to apply it consistently, like Dark Souls. I've just spent a lot of time playing Dark Souls. And when I play Dark Souls, I find a weapon and I'm going to go, okay, I learn everything there is to know about this weapon, and I'm going to go demolish the whole game with just this weapon. That's fun to me. But if there's stuff that, other players can do that is considered like bad manners, for instance, like manner pylons in StarCraft, or disrupting your workers. They're literally called manner pylons.
Yeah, I know. I know the strategy too, and that's why I'm laughing about it. Because goddamn, that strategy, this is bullshit. But screwing with people's resource, I don't think is bad manners. I think that's proper strategy. Your number one target should be their workers, and if they haven't defended their workers well, then that is even more so your number one target. Competitive is fine unless you take it too seriously. Well, it depends what you're doing. It depends what you're doing, right? Like there are instances where that amount of competition is called for because you're doing something competitive. Just don't be a competitive douchebag when you're not playing a competitive game, is basically the summary that we really need. And hey, welcome. Nice to see you. Yeah, I was really competitive when I played hockey, for example, but I'm playing a serious high-speed physical sport at the time, and we both want to win. So yeah, I used every little trick that was to my benefit that I could find. And if that meant telling him something really rude about his sister at the face-off, then that's what I did. But I got to the puck first, and that's really all that mattered at the end of the day. Yeah. See you later, buddy.
What would it be called if you hate PvPing RTSs because of all the micromanaging and strats? You just don't like competitive RTS.
Yeah. Yep. I don't like competitive RTS either. I like casual RTS. Casual RTS is great fun. Competitive RTS is
stressful.
Yeah.
Take it from somebody who has platinumed every race in StarCraft 2. Competitive RTS is stressful.
I had a buddy who was platinum in StarCraft and wanting to really push up his win ratios and stuff like that. And he started looking into how to, really get to that next level in RTS. And the stuff he was finding was like wrist workouts. And he was like, yeah, no, fuck this.
It's a lot more.
That was the end of it.
But okay, I think it's time for us to do some practical demonstrations, maybe.
When I think of the tricks and code help you guys were talking about before, or a game in a game Deus mentioned, I feel the same. Aren't they all the same? Strats and tricks and micromanaging? No, that's just getting really, 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 really good at that game's meta.
Yeah, we're trying to give tips that you can apply in any shooter game. As opposed to focusing specifically on one shooter game and what you need to do in that game to be good at that shooter.
We just pointed out for a brief moment that every game is different. But like as I said, literally every game is different. Literally. Like it doesn't matter. Even going from Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 2, the code is different. And we needed to learn different frame pacings and different timings with weapons and how things are going to interact again. It all just had to be relearned. It's really no different. You're still learning it. It's just, as you said, in a PvP setting, there's other people also learning it.
Yeah, maybe you just hate having to keep up with the meta. That's entirely possible.
That is fair. Meta burnout is very common in a lot of games when people play for very long because metas develop from the community themselves, not typically from game designers. They try their best, but you'll find it a lot in games like League of Legends where they have, they introduce some new champion and it can change up the meta. They don't really mean to do it this way. All of a sudden this play style is completely different. And, there was, I haven't played in a long time, but back when I played, everything was really heavily relied on mid laners, a lot of that kind of fancy glass cannon stuff. And then the meta kind of transitioned into top laners that were just super tanky. They couldn't die and they would just run through the whole thing. Or, if you're only played mid lane, well, now you're no longer in the, top pedestal spot. You're kind of just part of the team and it's not as fun for you maybe, or, maybe that play style doesn't work with the meta anymore. Now you have to completely play your change your play style. And it can be very frustrating to try to keep up with it. So that is definitely a thing is, trying to figure out metas. And plus it's not something the game will teach you. You have to find out by actually playing the game. And unfortunately, which means you kind of have to go get your ass kicked for a while before you figure out what the current meta is. And then by the time you learn it, it could change.
Yeah, Magic the Gathering is a good example of an evolving meta as well.
Also, fuck blue players. But anyway, let's do a little bit of practical demonstration around shooters. So I don't remember who asked the question, but there was somebody who asked, "Can we do a demonstration of aiming with the keyboard?" So this is something that I really I picked up partway through my shooter career and have found incredibly helpful. So as you can see, I've got my crosshair, about head height in front of me while I'm moving around. And you can see I've got my mouse hand up here. I'm not moving my mouse at all right now, but you can see my reticle is moving at head height, left and right. I'm using my keyboard to change where my reticle is. Specifically in Counter-Strike, this can be bad depending on which weapon you're using because it throws off your aim. But that's besides the point. This is the idea of keyboard aiming. You can see if I wanted to shoot this stop sign right here, this one that I'm painting red with my hit indicators, I can line up my mouse, remove my mouse from its mouse pad, and use my keyboard to center on that stop sign. Shooting the stop sign. Didn't use my mouse at all. And I can move, and now I can shoot this thing, whatever that is. Ladder, I think. And then I want to go back to shooting that stop sign again. Yeah, here we go. And you can see I haven't had to move my mouse. I have had no loss of precision. So I'm always able to nail what, in this case, would be a headshot if it were a person rather than a stop sign. Like every single shot is going right into the top of that stop sign. So that's the whole idea behind mouse aiming, or keyboard aiming, rather.
The opposite thing of the what I said.
You know that thing I said? The other one. So then one of the other things I wanted to demonstrate, because Counter-Strike is just like the first-person shooter. It is the oldest, most competitive, still around shooter. Is the principle of moving through a map in such a way that it makes you difficult to shoot. So as you're noticing, I'm moving around and I'm trying to keep my mouse cursor at about head height. That's more or less where the top half of a person would be if there was a person standing there. One of the things that you can do to use the fact that most people will be aiming with their mouse up above the ground. And again, this goes back to what I was saying before. Don't stare at the ground. I know this makes it easier for you to see more what's further down the line because your reticle isn't in the way, your gun model isn't in the way. Like if we have a large weapon, like for instance an AWP, you see this model is much larger. When I'm aiming up, it's blocking my view. I can't see that bottom right third of my screen. If I've got a pistol, I've got a lot more view here. It's easier to see when you're aiming down. Stop it. Mice are imprecise. So you want to keep your cursor up. You want to be trying to shoot in the head. The one thing you can do is when you're approaching a corner like this, you can move very quickly across. It leaves the smallest amount of time where you can be shot. You can only be shot when you're moving like this. And because you're a moving target, it's harder for you to be hit. And when you're standing, your center of mass is the easiest thing to hit. So that's where most people are going to aim. Now, one of the things that a lot of players will do, thinking that it'll make them harder to hit, but actually achieves the opposite of that goal, is they will crouch and try to do the same. And now you'll see this is taking a lot longer for me to move across this doorway. I'm exposed for a lot more time. And not only that, I've moved my critical hitbox, my head, down to where my chest normally is, where my center of mass normally is. So now I've put my crit hitbox right in the middle of where they're going to be aiming. This makes you super, super easy to kill. Never do this. And once you've checked a corner, once you've seen around it, once you've, be able to verify that there's nobody there, there's another technique that does involve your mouse. And this is called slicing a corner. So as you can see here with this corner, we've got this little hallway here. There's, positions where somebody could hide. Somebody could be hiding here. They can try and shoot you there. They could be peeking this corner over here, trying to hit your head on this side. They could be over here waiting for somebody to poke their nose through there so they can just fill you full of bullets with a shotgun. So there's a couple of things that you need to be able to do to take care of this. So you want to line up your cursor so that it's about level with where somebody's head is going to be. And you want to slowly move out so that you can see just the smallest slice. Like if there was somebody waiting on this side over here, trying to be like, oh, I'm so sneaky. I'm going to wait for rage to come and I'm going to shoot him. I'm going to shoot him right there. I'm right here. And you've slowly eked out. You've got the smallest slice of your body visible, while also being able to see one of the positions that you're vulnerable from. This allows you to potentially get the first shot off, like we were talking about before, with server latency favoring the aggressor for reasons of making the video game more fun. And now you've got your sight line is covered here. It's going to be significantly harder to hit you because you're not as exposed. So, okay, we've covered this angle. Now as we're moving, what do we do next? Because we want to keep moving forward, right? Well, not necessarily. You want to continue moving laterally. Now that you're in this position, you've already covered this position on the right. There's nobody there. You would have shot them already. Now you've just got to cover this position. So how do we do that? As we're moving out into the open, we want to swing our mouse in the opposite direction that we are traveling. So you see here, as I'm moving to the right, I'm swinging my mouse left. And you can see there's some imprecision in my aim there because I'm having to involve my mouse. As you're stepping out into the hallway here, you can acquire a target, again, at the point where you have exposed yourself as little as possible. You've taken this out of the equation. Now you're moving sideways. You're taking this position out of the equation. You're moving sideways. You're taking this position out of the equation. And now that you're on this side, you've also got a line on anybody who's in that little nook. In this part of the stream, have we talked about camping? We did a little bit. If you want to check it out, you can go back and check the VOD. So now that we've cleared this entire area ahead of us, we know that there's nobody going to shoot us from there. Now we can start to move forward. And this is a little bit, map knowledge. You need to know what the different positions that you can be shot from are. But now that you've made it so that you can move forward, we've already cleared this position. Nobody can shoot you from there. We've already cleared this position. Nobody can shoot you from there. We've already cleared this position. Nobody can shoot you from there either. But we haven't cleared this corner. So again, we're swinging our mouse in to check this corner as we're moving forward. So anybody who's here, you're going to take advantage of the latency inherent in the game, and you're going to start shooting. And you can see here, because I was moving my shots straight a bit, I hit each of these columns. That's also partially because I started to pre-fire on that corner, but because I'm getting ready. I want to be shooting here because that's where somebody who's going to be crouching, waiting for me to come around this corner, giving themselves maximum accuracy, that's exactly where their head's going to be. And if they're not crouching, then I'm going to shoot them in the chest, which is also a fairly high damage area. You're moving forward, you're sweeping. You're sweeping your way around this corner to see, okay, oh, no, we cleared that. There's nobody there. I'm going to back up. I'm going to reload. I'm going to check this doorway. No, nobody there. I'm going to do the same on the other side to make sure this side is clear. Somebody might be hiding here, might be facing the other way. They might be coming up these stairs, all different things that you can deal with. But the important thing is this concept of slicing the corner. Again, remember, we're peeking out and we're swiping our mouse the other way. We're making sure that we've cleared all of the positions that we can get shot from.
Now, don't worry about knowing every spot that somebody could possibly be shooting you from right away. That's not something you're going to instantly know. That's something that you've just got to get from playing the game. That's map knowledge, specifically for that map within that game.
It's something that you'll pick up with time playing the game. So now that we've covered sweeping a corner, a little bit of the basics about moving around a map, a little bit of understanding around how a character moves, a little bit of understanding about being aware of where your own crit hitbox is. Let's talk a little bit about what about looking left and right versus strafing left and right. I remember in some older games, you used to turn instead of slide. If the game allows it, would combining these two make it more accurate with keyboard aiming? Yes. And you can also work leaning into this as well. So, as you're going, as you're moving to the right, you would want to lean your character to the right as well, because that gives you an earlier peek around P90 pre-fire.
Yes.
As you're leaning to the right, that changes your hitbox. It moves your critical hitbox into a spot where it isn't normally. It gives you an earlier view. It exposes less of your regular hitbox. So you want to work in as much precise aim as you can, as well as little of your hitbox being visible at a time as you can. And Board brought up trackpads, and there's not really any benefit to using a trackpad, but if you have a trackball, that's an entirely different story. Now, this is a totally different genre of game, but if you're playing an old school arena shooter, a trackball actually gives you a huge advantage because you can do 360s. You can look everywhere. Nobody can sneak up on you. But that's a whole different genre of game. We don't really see Crosshair and CSGO splits the screen down the middle. Yeah, there's some crazy Crosshair setups, but we don't really see any of the arena shooters like we used to anymore. So there's not really all that much use case for a trackball or a trackpad for that matter. Let's see some of my skills in a real match. Maybe if I start streaming again. Next thing I wanted to talk about is actually getting those kills, actually making shots. And this is something that we hear all the time as gamers. We hear it in, any movies about the military. We hear it in video games with the military in it. We hear about, different training systems. If you've ever gone to a shooting range, they use the phrase tight, controlled bursts. And one of the reasons why I chose Counter-Strike as the game to demonstrate this is it really focuses on being able to control your shots. So as you can see, my mouse is not on my mouse pad. I'm not moving it right now. If I click for individual or just a couple of shots, because this is a full auto weapon, my grouping is very tight. Like individual shots, just going right where I'm aiming them. There's not really any spread going on. I can be very precise. This also works with short bursts. So you see I'm doing 2 or 3 round bursts. It's a little bit of kick, and the AK is notorious for kick in Counter-Strike. But the grouping is still pretty tight. Those are all pretty close. And then there's what I like to call panic mode, which is an inverse 7 with an AK. You don't want to do this. As you can see, even if you aim at the head for that first shot, after about 2 or 3 shots, your shots aren't going anywhere near your enemy. It's doing that inverse 7. And because this is Counter-Strike, that spray pattern is very, very repeatable and is one of the things that makes this game such high skill cap. Is that you can actually compensate for it. I'm not very good at it because I don't play much Counter-Strike, but you can see that grouping is a lot tighter than if I just hold the trigger down.
And this is something you'll see with a lot of people, especially when they're newer to shooters, is that, you know, they'll full auto and they'll be like, how did I not hit this guy? He only shot at me a couple times. Like, I full autoed him. And it's like, doesn't matter how much you shoot. It's quality over quantity. If they're not going to land, you know, they don't really matter.
Yeah.
You can go in and spray, and if you shoot him in the foot once and maybe in the shoulder, but he just shoots you in the head once, you know, he's gonna get the kill.
A bullet missed isn't worth much.
Yeah, and as you can see, like tap, 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 I can shoot pretty quickly. Those are all landing in exactly the same spot. All of those are headshots. All of them. Whereas this, I got 2 headshots. I used 30 bullets to get 2 headshots. You know, that doesn't seem like very good math to me.
You did kill the shit out of the tall guy behind him, though.
And then, what else did I want to touch on? Let me check my notes here. As my character just runs off into the distance. Right.
When you were slicing the corner, I noticed you were standing back a ways from the corner.
Yes. That is one of the things that I wanted to talk about with movement, but I didn't quite get to. The distance from a corner means that you can get a smaller slice. So like right here, I'm tucked right up against this wall. If I try and step out, I just exposed all of this area. It's very difficult for me to cover all of this area as I'm stepping out. So if I'm farther back, I step out. Oh, I've just got just a little bit. Okay, that's more manageable. If I step out a little bit more, okay, you know, I've taken a little too much of a step there, but as I come coming out, I can shoot here, I can shoot here, I can shoot here, and now I've gone a bit too far. I've exposed myself a little bit too much. But my options when I'm close are, and this is 1 keyboard press on the D key. Okay, I've got a little bit, and I'm fully exposed. That's just click, click, click. Like, I've got all this area down here I need to worry about, and these doors always have a sniper in them. Always. I've got these boxes here I need to worry about. There might be somebody hiding behind those. I've got this angle here where somebody can be peeking that corner. I've got the position down here where somebody could be pre-firing. I've got these boxes down here. Like, you're screwed. If you do that step from back here, you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I've got this position right here I need to worry about. That's it. That's the only thing I need to worry about. And if we were talking about more than this corridor, I've also got a better view over here where there might be other players waiting to try and take pot shots at me. So as you can see, if you're wider, you've got more options for covering yourself. I've cut this whole part down here from the equation. I've got less of myself exposed to the snipers at the back. I've got this position covered on my previous couple of movements, and I've got a perfect headshot lined up for the guy behind that box. Like, it's all set to go already. You don't need to worry about it. Anything else we can think of to demonstrate? I've totally lost my train of thought. I guess I could do a little bit of slicing demonstration.
Yes.
So,
I'd love to see this, but I'll be right back.
With Counter-Strike, it works a little bit differently than a lot of other modern games, like Call of Duty, for instance. Call of Duty, your first shot, basically no matter how quickly you're moving, is going to go center mass. It's going to go right where you're aiming. Makes it very easy to get moving kills. In Counter-Strike, If I'm moving, it just kind of goes wherever. You can see all those red and blue dots appearing down there. Very difficult to control while you're moving. It gets even worse if you try in full auto. Like, there's no controlling this whatsoever. So you want to move slow in Counter-Strike. How do you do that? You can hold shift to walk, which still has some variance to it, but not nearly as much. Or you can hold control to crouch, which really slows you down, makes you very vulnerable, but you can see all of these shots are going exactly where I'm aiming. Yes, and Howling God brings up a very good point. It also muffles your footsteps. So if you're slicing, say, this corner here, there's a couple of positions to be aware of. You need to be aware of these barrels, because if there's somebody standing here or crouching here, they've got a good line on you. They can be, doing the same. They can be trying to get through that corner to get you. There can be somebody over here waiting because they know that they saw you run from here. They know you're going this way, so they're getting ready. They're going to shoot you right in the head just as you're going through that little crack there. I hear you running my way. I'm going to start pre-firing the moment you're a step away. Exactly. Sound is crucial, and like we said, don't fall for the gamer bullshit. You just need decent headphones. You also need to be aware of this position back here. It's farther away, so your target is harder to hit, but it gives you more time to be able to shoot somebody as they're moving towards that hall over there. You also need to be aware of anybody who might be coming up this path, because they can be tucked back here, they can be moving forward and trying to carefully pick off anybody who's coming this way. So let's practice slicing this corner a little bit. You're moving up and you go, okay, I need to be ready. There might be some enemies here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, there's that one. I'm sitting fairly far back from the corner, and there's my position. Sitting fairly far back from the corner. Let's move a little further. Yep. Here's my headshots. There's that guy. He's dead as shit. We have killed him like 5 or 6 times now. All of these shots are going directly into where his head would be. So the next position we need to worry about as we're slicing, we can see this position. Okay, well, we gotta worry about that one. Let's go. Yep, there's one. There's another one. Yep, we got those two. Those two are covered. We figured out 2 of the 4 positions that we've talked about so far. We've got slowly 1, 2, bam, 2 headshots, bam, 3 headshots, bam, 4 headshots. And we're just slowly making our way across this corner, making sure that the smallest amount of us is visible while the most amount of them is visible. So as we're slicing this corner, we're making sure that there's, no people in these positions that we decided we need to worry about. Remember these barrels over by these boxes here, over in this corner here, over here, waiting for you to come around there, waiting for you to peek so they can try and get their headshot. And the only thing that's kind of undefined is anybody who might be coming up here. There's no clear indicator of where this person will be. Like, they might be tucked into this little hole, but that's more or less covered when you're shooting at the barrels. So generally not a very good place to be. So again, we're coming around this corner, we're getting ready. I'm going to slow down, make sure our footsteps are quiet. We're going to take our shots around here. We're going to take our shots here. We're going to take our shots here. And okay, we now know that this area is safe. There's nobody there. We exposed as little of ourselves as possible, and we checked those dangerous barrels. We checked this nook. We checked this nook. And you can see as we're checking these things, we are exposing more of ourselves, but we've only exposed just the tiniest bit when we're doing our first check. Like the person that's over here literally cannot shoot you. They can't do it. They cannot see you from that angle. It is impossible. So you've made it so that you only need to deal with these barrels. That is the only thing that you need to deal with when you're slicing this corner. And again, you're moving forwards. We now know that there's nobody here, because if there was, you would have killed them. Now we're checking here. We've moved our mouse slightly to the left. Okay, there's nobody there. We've killed the shit out of them if they were. Here, okay, yeah, no, nobody there. But again, we've got that headshot lined up already. We're using our keyboard to move, and we're exposing as little of ourselves as possible as we're going around this corner. And one more right here. And yeah. Okay, no, nobody there. We now know as little as possible. Yep. We now know that this area is safe. We've cleared every dangerous corner. We've exposed as little of ourselves as possible. And we've killed everybody who was hiding in any of those positions. We did it. We know this area is safe. We can walk up here now until you come out to here. And now you've got, this whole area to deal with, and these doors, and the sniper that's always behind them, and this door, and these boxes. And yeah. So if you want to do a similar technique more than once, we can slice this way. And then we can slice this way. I would not recommend doing this because walking out to here is suicide. You will always be shot by somebody who's down in the double doors. But you can chain the idea of slicing to make sure that you're as safe as possible whenever you're moving. Again, don't do precisely this, but this is the technique that you would be using.
If you could successfully do it at this speed, you would be a world champion.
Well, you'd be at least pretty decent at Counter-Strike. Again, you're seeing, I'm just moving around the map, but I'm pointing my reticle where the enemy would be. And I'm exposing as little of myself as possible while checking all of these corners. Again, I'm ignoring this area, but I'm checking these corners. I'm making sure there's nobody down there. Checking this corner. I'm checking behind that dumpster. Moving over here. I'm checking between these doors, using as little of my view box as possible to make sure it's safe. Again, falling back on Pseudo's knowledge, we would, if we had one, throw a flashbang into here to clear this corner and this corner, because we literally cannot hit them from here. Can't do it. Those doors are too thick. The bullets won't penetrate. As you can see, the door and the boxes stop those bullets. I love these hit markers. They're so good. But you cannot cover that. So here we would want to use a flashbang. We'd throw the flashbang in there. That would disorient them, at the very least, make them look away. As we're slicing this corner, we're checking back there because there could be somebody to shoot you. And we're immediately turning in here because we want to be ready for the guy who's waiting here to try and shoot us. Again, we slice the corner, we slice the corner, we slice the corner, we slice the corner. It's just the sort of foundational tool for moving around the map and dying as little as possible. You want to expose as little of your hitbox as possible and give the most chance of hitting the enemy's hitbox.
I think the biggest 101 takeaway for me is that being farther away from the corner is much better than being closer to the corner. Because in your head, you're always like, I'm at the wall, I'm safe.
But this isn't real life. This is video games. So this doesn't actually do anything for you.
No.
It's actually hurting you.
Yeah.
I got to take off because I have to take off at 15:02.
Cool. Anything you want to add before you leave?
No, that's pretty much it. Just watch your corners. Don't full auto single shot, and please use grenades if they're in the game. I'm so tired of grenades. Have a good night, everybody.
Cheers, Pseudo.
Yeah, Pseudo. Is there anything you would like me to go over, Deus?
I mean, I don't even know enough for you to go over. I'm pretty happy. Are there any questions in chat? I think it's the bigger question to me. Is there anything you guys want to ask? Did we talk about first shot accuracy and bloom?
No, we didn't. And that is a great thing to talk about. So in Counter-Strike, as I showed you before, the first shot goes exactly where you're aiming. And this is one of the things I love about this game. You can be super, super, super precise. But as soon as you start auto-firing, bullets go everywhere. Now, one of the reasons that Counter-Strike is so competitive, so highly played, is that it has a very consistent shot pattern for each weapons. You can learn what all of these shot patterns are. And the AK, it's always going to be backwards 7. Every time. One of my favorite weapons in the game. But in other shooters, like, say, a Call of Duty or a Battlefield game. Actually, I don't know about Battlefield. I think they do this. As you shoot, the bullets actually go in random patterns. So your first shot, again, generally will go where you're aiming, unless you're BioShock and it drives us all crazy. But
you heard us complain about that when we were playing BioShock, and this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, because if I am to believe that I am this character, then I know where I'm pointing this gun. Like, it's gonna go there. I've aimed it there. That's where I put it. So shoot where I point. But as you hold down the trigger, in games that aren't Counter-Strike, often there will be a random spread applied to your fire. And this is exactly what I was just going to touch on, Howling God. So thank you for bringing that up. Your first shot is very close to where you're going to be aiming. Oops, I accidentally won, or I accidentally lost. But after that, that cone will spread. The accuracy of your shots then become lower and lower as you continue to fire. And this is something that is more obvious in longer ranges. So, like, see, I've got this SMG now. This SMG, as you can see, very nice, tight grouping, even when you're moving in close range. Very nice. All of those bullets are going mostly in the same spot. But as we go longer range, oh, well, that's not looking so great anymore. Those are going all over the place. Like, we've got some shots that are going all the way up here, and I wasn't even full auto. I was burst firing. I was aiming here, but there were bullets all over the place. And this is where it starts to come into game knowledge. Now you can pick up a different weapon, like this assault rifle. Burst firing, they're all going right there. And that's the aim cone that we're talking about. When the accuracy cone expands, and different weapons will expand the cone at different rates based on their statistics. An SMG, it will generally expand the cone more at longer distances, whereas an assault rifle will expand the cone less at longer distances. And then you get into stuff like everybody's favorite, the AWP, which just points exactly where you shoot it. Or shoots exactly where you point it. Because it's a single shot. That accuracy cone is recovering every single time. And if we go inspect that, we can see that all of these bullets landed in exactly the same spot.
Of course, that is then balanced by a low rate of fire. So if you miss one of those shots, it's going to be far more detrimental.
Exactly. But the other trade-off is that while you're moving with the AWP, your accuracy cone is basically the entire screen. Like, how did it hit there? This is useless. This is not shooting at all where I'm pointing it. I have no control over that. And then there's the Negev, which Howling God was just talking about. Apparently, you play some Counter-Strike, which has a fairly spread out accuracy cone, but fairly controllable. Like at this range, we would expect the AK to have that nice tight inverse 7 shape. And you can see the Negev, by default, its accuracy cone is wider. It's not spraying in that nice tight pattern like the AK was. If I hold down the trigger, it actually gets tighter though. And you see the accuracy cone, while it's still moving up and down and it's still not as tight as the AK, it's shooting in a nice, relatively tight mid-range grouping. So if you take something like the Negev and say I wanted to put all my bullets into that window, I could start shooting and then just pull it down. Now all of my bullets are going exactly where I started, because the grouping has actually gotten narrower. The accuracy cone has actually gotten tighter, giving you better control. Negev from car on site A into people rushing cat on dust 2. Yeah, that just destroys entire teams. All of their heads end up exactly where that spray is going, and you just take down the whole team all at once. It's wonderful.
That wasn't even English to me.
It's Counter-Strike stuff.
I figured. I'm assuming Negev is a map.
Negev is actually this.
Oh, that's the weapon?
This
okay.
LMG.
From the car on Site A. Site A is the map then? Car is the spot on the map?
Dust 2 is the map.
Okay.
And you can see up in the top left corner of the window that I've got, it says T start. That is terrorist start.
Yeah.
And this is all specific to Counter-Strike at this point. But as I'm moving, I'm now in outside long. That's what the community has named this area.
Gotcha.
Now, as I'm moving through outside long, I'm getting into long doors. As you might have guessed, it's because there's doors. Move through long doors, then you're getting into long itself. Called long because it's long. And then this gets you down to the A plant spot. You can see A. And if I wanted to actually end this round, this is where I would plant the bomb. Bomb site A. And all of these little areas have their own little names that you call them, so you can call out positions to people.
Yeah.
But that's all very much Counter-Strike specific knowledge.
Awesome. You can still take that kind of knowledge and start applying the rudimentary aspects of it to other game.
Absolutely, this applies with a gamepad. All of these techniques don't actually matter what input device you're using. It's all just how the game works. You will be less precise, but all of this could be applied, playing Halo, the original Halo and the original Xbox. Or it can be applied playing something that's extremely competitive, like CSGO. Or it can be applied playing something that is mostly random, like PUBG. This is just the general idea of how a shooter works. You want to be slicing your corners. Some of these inputs may be harder on other devices, but it doesn't actually matter what device you're using as long as you're applying these techniques.
Excellent. I think he may have been joking too, judging by the kappa, but
Yeah, I just chose to interpret it seriously because this actually can be applied with any input method.
Yeah. It's always nice to account for the poor people stuck on a gamepad. For multiple competitive FPS, learning the map positions, weapon spawn, callouts, etc. are, I wouldn't even say very helpful, I would say essential for competitive FPS. If you don't know the layout of everything on the map, you're not going to be competitive. That would be like playing hockey and not knowing where the red line is.
Yeah, you have to know your surroundings. They have to be a known quantity to you, so they stop being a variable. And now you're not playing against the map, you're playing against the other players.
The red line in hockey is actually an interesting example because there's multiple lines that are red, but only one of them is the red line.
Yeah, also true. I'm just beating up this poor car while you get video games ready to give away.
Oh, they're already ready.
All right.
That's what I've been doing while you were talking, is that.
Let's give away some video games then.
Oh my, why are you so big and blue? Whatever. Big and blue! Huge and blue. Oh my. Let's just bring you down to 33? 33 seems fine. Let's just highlight all of that. Just go like 30. There. Yeah. Please stay 30 as I take more people. Anyway, Acid! If you've been listening, you've won another game. And Mole, who I'm not surprised to see in the list, because 30. Come on, stop. Stop with the... Stop! Stop it! You're bad. You know what? I'm gonna... That was just a bunch of game information, so that was all right. That was okay for you to see. That's good. Didn't have like super secret secure passwords or something displayed on stream. That's always nice.
It's a good starting point for sure.
Let's zoom it up a bit. There we go. All right. Acid 287 Mole. There we go. Yay! It's not size 5 million whenever I paste it anymore. Yay! So, if there's any final questions or comments about FPS gameplay while I'm doing this, make sure to shoot them out. This is your moment, Zelo.
Ooh, Zelo won a game.
No, sorry, can't give Zelo a second game.
Rip.
Bear Anger. I know how to find Bear Anger. I see them regularly. Darth Mole might be hard to track down, though.
No. It's a tough life.
It
I
is.
think we'll do it.
Stop giving me Zelo. He's already won.
Fun with RNG.
And Perforos. All right. Let's get 5 games to giveaways. One of the most important parts, only expose yourself to one position at a time and always do it in order to peek and pre-fire at the position. And always make sure they're old enough before you expose yourself to them.
I mean, you keepo at the end of that first one, but that's actually basically it. Expose yourself to only one position at a time. When you're peeking, you should probably pre-fire.
Mole, you won a very interesting game. I actually encourage you to play this one. It's bite-sized and quick and fantastic. Fantastic. It's from the makers of FTL. And if you haven't played FTL, you don't play it because your life will disappear. But you should play Into the Breach.
Go play FTL. FTL is really good. Ooh, yes, Into the Breach. More Ben Prunty. More Ben Prunty is more better.
Zelo, I have no idea what the final station is, so you'll have to tell us what it is. I actually didn't really love this game. but it's a pretty good. It's an actual game. It's a full on real like produced and developed game. So I'll make sure to deliver that to Bear. You're welcome for the game. Thank you for the support. The game's like a little token for everything you do for us. That's all it is. Thank you for being here. And no, that's not a game.
Was it a DLC?
Indie game, the movie, the Steam key. But this one is Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. I hope you appreciate that one. That one's going back to the childhood kind of a things for most people. I think so.
Or before they were born. We're old now.
That game isn't inexpensive either. We didn't pay anything for any of these. Don't you worry.
You have thrown so much money at this channel.
Yeah. The amount of the gift subs you've thrown definitely covers the cost of the winnings. Don't worry. You do too much as it is. Just show up and enjoy. That's all we really want you to do. Just show up, enjoy, and maybe learn something when you do it. That's really all we ask.
Plus, all of these games are just coming from our humble libraries where we had backlogs of hundreds of games.
We love supporting Humble. We see a good deal. We're like, yeah, I own half of those games, but it's charity, and I want a couple of the other ones. And then when we started streaming, we're like, we have all of these games.
Oh, we can give them to people. They don't have to sit in our inventories anymore.
I love FF Tactics. The only thing I hate about FF Tactics is the people who think that FF Tactics Advanced is FF Tactics.
Not the same game.
Those people should be shot out of a cannon.
Into the sun. Okay, maybe not the sun. Maybe into like a nice pad.
No. Into the sun with their eyes stuck open, so they're just staring at it, burning it into their retinas the entire time they fly at it. You use spears. Game over. What's the difference? I played neither. Completely different games. They're not the same at all. Nothing about them is the same. The only thing they have in common is the name Final Fantasy Tactics. No, they're not supposed to be. They're not billed to be the same. They're actually completely different developed games. It has nothing to do with the original game. There's no story connection. There's no world connection. There's no code connection. And Final Fantasy Tactics is a much better game than Advance. So everybody goes out and plays FFT Advance and then goes, oh, I don't really like Final Fantasy Tactics. And I have to punch them for saying that. Because it's a really good game.
I really like the art in FFT too. Really nice art in that game.
Especially for its era. And Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics will destroy you. That game will just annihilate you. If you set out to play Final Fantasy Tactics, keep 4 or 5 save slots. And never, ever, 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 ever save over your farthest back save, which should always have access to a spot to grind. And if you don't have a spot to grind, don't overwrite that save. I soft-locked myself 3 times trying to beat that game as a kid. At 3 different points. And not because the game's poorly designed, just because I did the dumb and then ended up in a battle that was so hard that I stood no chance and couldn't go get stronger. Entirely my fault. Each battle, some judges say what abilities/weapons are not allowed to be used. Oh, that's disgusting. Can't use this in that fight? Artificial difficulty.
Yeah, pretty gross.
Whereas Final Fantasy Tactics used none of that, gave you all the power in the world, and then beat you to death.
Our game.
Yeah. Yeah, super hard game, filled with some crazy secrets. Like, you'll never, ever get the ultimate weapon in that game without learning how to do it first. You just won't. If you don't know how to do it, you're not going to get it. Not because it's so impossible to think of, but because where they put it is so difficult that you don't have time to stop and think that there might be secrets around. All you can do is win or die. Great game. Yeah. Play that. Rage, thank you so much for the lessons. I learned a lot.
You're very welcome. I hope it was helpful.
Punch them. Yes. Excellent clip. I approve. I hope to be back later. I don't want to promise anything because I keep saying I hope to play games later and then just being like, no, I'm just going to sit here and play games by myself. You learned you hate metagame. We do want to do a panel on game metas. So I will make sure to schedule that for a coming panel. I'm going to go eat some food. I'm going to come back. I'm going to play something. We might do multiplayer. We might do single player. We'll see who's around. I'll see you guys then. But until then, I'm Deus.
And I'm Rage.
And may all your shots actually be headshots now.